Self-care. It's such a deep, layered word, and for me, it's really become the process of getting to know yourself, showing up for yourself over and over again. In creation of the Self-Care Creature podcast, I want to teach you, too, how to have a relationship with yourself. We're going to dive into the psychological and physiological unfoldings of adopting what I love to call a self-care lifestyle. This podcast is here to help you, the stressed out but spiritually minded individual who can feel that wild calling in your heart, who wants to develop self-care rituals to support your daily living, give you the confidence and know-how to live through your intuition and raise your self-worth. You deserve it. You are capable of this. And I want to help you understand how the hell to get there, what it actually means, and how do you actually live it. That's where my intention is with this podcast. The Self-Care Creature podcast, brought to you by me, your host, Courtney Klopp. Let's dive in. Hello, creatures. Before we dive into today's podcast episode, I just want to take a moment to say thank you for listening. This is a form of support for me, which I really greatly appreciate. And it's also something that I love giving to you for free. I hope that it helps you in whatever way you need at this time, offering insights, reflections, and growth and healing on your journey. I want to mention that if you are interested, I have just launched my private Patreon. It is patreon.com/selfcarecreature, and it is a place where I am sharing my own personal writings and exploring spirituality with others. There are monthly new moon Zoom calls and weekly poetry shares, and there's also a merch loyalty program with stickers, mugs, mini prints, tote bags, sweatshirts. So if that is something that is of interest to you, I wanted to just ask you to consider that. It's as little as $3 per month. And if you don't want to subscribe to something like that, but wish to contribute monetarily in some way, I also have a tip jar, and the links for those are in the show notes, wherever you are listening. I am a small business. I am a single employee in this small business with the occasional help from my virtual assistant. Shout out to Leanne. And that is why you hear about this kind ask. Thank you for considering. Again, thank you for tuning in. And now on to the episode. Hello and welcome back. I'm here today with someone that I'm really excited to interview. It is a friend of mine, and I think I say that almost every time I have somebody on the podcast. This is a friend of mine. But Demi is a very special person because we've known each other for most of our lives. We were best friends in middle school, and we have found that we are in very similar lines of work, and our lives have kind of drifted back with each other over the last couple years. And so, yeah, it's really special. Welcome, Demi.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So excited to have you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get going into the other stuff?
Yeah, well, my name's Demi Fair. As Courtney mentioned, we've known each other for a really long time and found our paths kind of weaving along the same journey a little bit. And I do the work in the realm of gut-brain healing. So I have a business called Trust Your Gut, and I focus on helping people who have gut-brain issues, mostly IBS, heal those symptoms that tend to be chronic and lifelong for many of the people I work with through a really unique approach of mine, which blends nervous system healing, trauma healing, and nutritional therapy. So that ended up coming into my life through my own lifelong journey. So, I mean, since we knew each other, I was struggling with a lot of those things myself.
Right.
That led me to this point today.
Would you mind sharing a little bit more about what pieces in your life got you to kind of creating like this path and this business for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I struggled with chronic gut issues, mostly like chronic constipation, probably since the time I was an infant. It started really early in my life. And also in my young years as well, I was like always a highly sensitive kid. I struggled with anxiety and even OCD at a young age. And then throughout kind of my more like teenage years, I feel like my gut issues really amplified again, where it was just like really severe constipation, bloating, pain. And I feel like my anxiety kind of amplified again. So it was always kind of this thing within my life that came in and out. And so at that age of being a teenager, you start to like really feel it differently, you know? And at that time when I would go and get help, you know, doctors would be like, oh, you just have IBS. Here, why don't you take some psyllium husk, have a laxative, that's it. And I'd be like, this is not helping me. There's gotta be more to this. And it was kind of this combination of working at the food co-op and starting to just learn more about food, like really good quality food. And I went to see a colon hydrotherapist because I was so miserable.
Oh, yeah.
And she was the first person who ever asked me about my diet.
Oh, really?
Yes. No doctor ever asked me about my diet. She asked me, and she suggested I eliminate a couple things. And she suggested some supplements.
Okay.
And I found relief through those things for the first time. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing. And that set me off on my nutrition journey.
Yeah.
So that's when I was like 17 or something.
Okay.
And that is what began what I would say has been like a 17-year deep gut-brain healing journey that I've been on.
Yeah.
And it did start a lot with nutrition, and I found a lot of relief, and I got really hyper-focused on nutrition, which eventually led me to doing my nutritional therapy training that we both have done.
Yes.
But then, you know, I just found that like my symptoms were still there. They'd like get really bad at times. And so, you know, this is a 17-year long thing. I'm trying to like make it succinct, but
sure.
There was like time, and then I'd be like, okay, well maybe I need to do stool tests now and figure out like what imbalances are in my microbiome, like do more elimination diets, like double down on like the supplement protocols I'm doing. And like sometimes that would help for a little bit, and then I'd still wouldn't feel better. And then I was like, well, I need to look at like maybe other healing arts and modalities. So I ended up trying like everything from, you know, Reiki and craniosacral massage to plant medicine ceremonies to Vipassana retreats to, you know, whatever, you name it. I probably tried it.
The whole spectrum.
The whole spectrum, which I say that many of those things had their purpose and their place and were really helpful. Like obviously nutrition has been and is an important part of my IBS journey and for many people with IBS. But I just still found myself like really struggling, especially with anxiety, with my symptoms. Like the things I was trying just made me feel more anxious about what I was eating and what would cause my symptoms to flare and stuff.
Yeah.
And then there was just kind of this like light bulb moment where I realized that I could do all the right diets. I could do all the right supplements. I could do all the right quote unquote things, but while I was dysregulated within my nervous system, they were only going to do so much. And I started to learn more about my personal nervous system, how I personally had been in chronic fight or flight for most of my life since a child.
Yeah.
How I inherited that, which set me up as an infant to have constipation and anxiety. And once I started to unpack all of that, I started to see all these patterns to my symptoms and things started to click into place. And then I began to actually work with my nervous system, with some of the trauma I had experienced and inherited. And that is when I started to see major shifts in my symptoms to now I just don't experience any of the IBS symptoms anymore.
Oh, wow. At all?
Nope.
Not even like flare-ups occasionally, or just...
I mean, I think I will always have some bit of a sensitive gut, you know, and I could like, yeah, sometimes I'll get bloated or maybe my stool is a little bit different, but it's pretty minimal. And the key for me is it doesn't make me feel defeated or debilitated or send me into an anxiety spiral.
Yeah.
And like that is true healing to me. It's
right.
like feeling that like even if symptoms do flare a little bit or I go through a stressful period, I have resiliency in my nervous system to make it through and know that, oh, I know how to nourish myself through this flare. And it's not because I ate something bad or I didn't do it right or I need to be more in control. I can actually be like, oh, I understand maybe why this happened. I've been kind of going through this right now in my life. I know how to best nourish myself through this and it's going to be okay.
Yeah. Wow. That's profound.
Yeah.
Where can you speak more to this light bulb moment at all? Was it like, where did you first learn about like nervous healing or nervous system healing at all?
Yeah. And I guess like when I say light bulb, when I think back to that, I'm like, oh no, this seed was planted a long time ago.
Okay.
You know, but
sure.
It was actually when I was in university is when I learned about, somatic work and the mind-body connection. And I first learned about somatic experiencing, that modality. It's a therapeutic modality that I am finishing up training in. And I was very lucky to be at a university where there was a professor who was a somatic psychologist who came in and I took classes from him.
Oh, wow.
And so this is when I first started to learn all about it. And I did make some of those connections then to like, oh, my gut issues and my overthinking and anxiety.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of in there, but it took me some years after to actually move past my beliefs around like food is the cause of my symptoms and I just need to be really restrictive with my diet or I need to eliminate this imbalance in my microbiome. It took me a little bit and I think that was just part of my healing journey. I needed to go through these certain things until I started to, I think, really uncover more of my childhood and my past and start to really understand all of that. So it was truly kind of a slow unraveling, probably more than like a light bulb moment, if I'm really being honest with myself. But there was like a shift, and I think that was probably 4 or 5 years ago when I kind of moved back home after traveling and I just really started to feel feel that in my system, like and maybe where the age of my life and where I was in my healing journey, I was actually finally ready to look at that.
Yeah, I can really relate to what you're saying as far as it's all this accumulation in our life that feels like a light bulb moment, but then we stop and pause and realize like, oh wait, but it was a seed planted so long ago. And I know that this isn't true for everyone, but I feel like we share this, is like sometimes you have to go like really hardcore into, especially for us, it was like nutrition and that side of it and being like, this is the thing. Yeah. And then to realize like, wait a second, and like kind of like unravel and unlayer and just peel back from being so intense about something to realize like, I want to be more chill. Is it possible? And like kind of follow that journey. And I think a lot of people do get caught up in like the hard rules, especially in what we're talking about with the clients that you work with that are working with like chronic gut issues.
Yeah. And that's not their fault, right? It's
of
just
course not.
What is commonly recommended.
Yes, absolutely. And then perpetuated through other practitioners because that's all they're taught as well.
Exactly.
And we kind of have to take it upon ourselves as practitioners to bring in a different and more holistic approach. Like you have pieced together all of these really beautiful things to create this within your own practice.
Yeah.
Do you mind breaking down for us, for the people that don't necessarily know, or just to like lay it out there, like what are some of the differences between like what is specifically nervous system regulation? How would you define trauma healing and also the nutritional therapy piece?
Sure. Yeah. Maybe I'll start with nutritional therapy.
Perfect.
I really see it as a way that we look at the whole body, the holistic approach to someone's nutrition. And my view of nutrition is that it's not about diet. Nutrition is so much more than that. I work with 5 pillars within like my program. We're looking at hydration, movement, connection, right? To self, to others, to nature, to spirit.
Yes.
And diet is in there as well. And another one that I'm forgetting, I think I only listed 4. So just to give you an example, like it's really taking into account the whole person. So that might be looking at the different systems of the body, the adrenals, like the endocrine, the hormonal, the immune, the nervous, the digestive, like how is everything working together? And how do we support that through maybe diet, maybe sometimes supplementation, but also just through our lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like what's going on in our life that's either supporting or hindering, health in those areas. So that's how I approach nutritional therapy. Then with nervous system regulation, I think a lot of people think that nervous system regulation means being really calm or chill. But that is not what it means at all. Of course, we all like to feel that way. But nervous system regulation is just like, can our nervous system appropriately respond to whatever's going on in our internal or external environment, right? So if there's a car coming down the lane at you, you want to be in a fight or flight response so you can get the heck out of the way and take quick action. If you were super calm and chill, that would be dysregulated, right? So we want to make sure that we have this flexibility to go in between our different nervous system states in a way that's appropriate for what's actually going on. And when people are dysregulated, it's typically because they're a little bit overactivated in a state. They spend maybe too much time there, or their system has learned that this thing is really unsafe when maybe it's actually not. And their system's responding to it as that's a threat, that's a stressor. So it's really about understanding our own personal nervous system, what those different states of our nervous system feel like to us, and what triggers us into some of those states, and what helps us come out of those states when we need to, like when there is no longer a threat or a stressor, and come back into a state where we're able to feel safe, connected, grounded. So it's really understand, like first step is kind of really always understanding about your nervous system and what that feels like for you. And then I support people in really teaching them different somatic tools that are appropriate for that state of their nervous system so they can regulate and kind of bring themselves out of it. And then trauma healing, this just kind of takes that nervous system regulation a bit further, because often what can happen when we go through either chronic stress or traumatic stress is our nervous system can decide, oh, this thing is really unsafe. We might go through this traumatic experience and we didn't get to like appropriately respond. Maybe we didn't get to fight or get away. And if we're unable to complete that, survival response in our body, we might kind of store that pattern in our system. And now we start to inappropriately respond to things in our internal, external environment because of this unprocessed trauma. So when we work with trauma healing, we're trying to, access maybe these patterns in the nervous system that are not benefiting us anymore. In the past, it was to keep us safe and it was an amazing thing. But now in our present life, we don't need that. And we are essentially working to, teach the nervous system that it can move out of that trauma and it can develop resiliency. And so my favorite way to do that is through somatic experiencing, which is working a lot with the body to help, complete these trauma responses and build resiliency in the nervous system. There's another modality I really like to use, called parts work or inner child work, and I look a lot intergenerational trauma because that's something that many of us have, and it's very fascinating. And so that's what I like to use in the realm of trauma healing that I find really safe and effective.
Thank you for breaking all of those down. I have like so many things that come up in my own mind, and I'm like, okay, where do I even...
It's a lot.
Yeah. That's okay. That's okay. One of the first things that I took a note down here is I hear this term a lot, complete the trauma response or complete the stress cycle. What does that mean exactly?
Let's see if I can give a simple example. So let's say that you are driving in your car and you get rear-ended.
Okay.
And you didn't see it coming, right? Typically, when there's some sort of like threat or stress or something that alerts us, the first thing we're gonna do is like orient to that, right? Like you're walking through the woods and you hear a snap in the bushes, you're gonna like snap over and look and see what's there. Like that's one of our first like responses, is to orient to whatever's going on. So that might be a response that didn't get completed. If you got rear-ended and you never got the chance to look and see it coming, your system might hold on to some level of trauma where like you might need to kind of rework it and even envision yourself being able to look and see the car coming before it hit you. And that could complete a response. Or it could be something like, you know, a dog attack where you didn't get to like run away from the dog, or you didn't get to fight it off, and that is what kind of caused the trauma to stay within your system. And so you might rework it in a way where you're able to actually like fight off the dog,
okay,
you know, or run away from it. So just to give like some simple examples, because it can become way more complex than that. And the body and the nervous system typically tells us what it needs to do.
Okay.
But it's just thinking about when we go through a traumatic event, we're always asking what didn't get to happen.
Oh.
That should have happened.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's often the answer as to how do we rework or heal this trauma.
Oh, wow. Can you repeat that?
What didn't get to happen?
What didn't get to happen?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's powerful.
Yeah.
I'm going to take that in for just a second. I don't think I've ever thought about it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Totally.
I'm going to move on to our next question.
Great.
I guess what I have written down here that I want to circle back to that we've touched on a little bit is that your work tends to veer off from a lot of what the traditional protocols and things that are brought up in these healing approaches are. But what are those? Like, what are the more conventional, like, especially for gut healing? Right. And are there, like, gut-brain connections in the, like, I don't know, our modern-day Western medicine or...
Oh, boy.
I have a big question.
Modern-day Western medicine? No. It's not really taking into account, I would say, the mind-body connection or because so...
Yeah.
The gut-brain connection is the foundation of the mind-body connection. And, you know, think about modern Western medicine. When you have, you know, physical symptoms, you go to a doctor who works on you with your physical symptoms. When you have mental health symptoms, you go to a therapist. Like, things are so separated and differentiated when they're actually all interconnected.
Yes.
And I just can say from my experience, every time I went to a doctor or Western medicine approach, they never asked me about my mental health.
Right.
Or my nervous system health, right?
Yeah.
Everything is so separated.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that that's happening. I'm sure there are practitioners and doctors out there who are doing it, and I think it's going to become more and more popular and more well known.
Yes.
But typically, right, if you go to a Western medicine practitioner for your IBS, you're going to get the same thing that I did. Oh, you just have IBS. There's no cure. You're going to have to manage the symptoms for the rest of your life with your diet. Eat low FODMAP.
Right. Or
cut out these things. Here's a low FODMAP handout. You're constipated.
Take a laxative.
Takes a laxative and take a fiber supplement.
Fiber supplement.
Like whatever. Like it's kind of like, I think a lot of people are probably like, oh yeah, that's kind of where I was at. Or like people have been told it's all in their head.
Oh.
Which is horrible.
Yeah.
And then, you know, if we're going to more of like a gut health practitioner, even naturopaths, even functional medicine doctors, I went to a lot of them. What happened? Oh, diet.
Right.
Here's this big supplement protocol to take. oh, let's do some stool tests and find out what's going on. Oh, you have dysbiosis, you have candida, you have SIBO. Here, take this eradication protocol of all these antimicrobials, and also cut things out of your diet.
Right.
You know, and then sometimes it's like, well, also reduce your stress.
Right.
And it's like, just reduce your stress. And people are like, I'm trying to reduce my stress. I meditate, I journal, I go for walks, I do some breath work, and they're like, but I'm still stressed out. Yeah, because there's deep-seated patterns in your nervous system that are keeping you in that cycle of chronic stress.
Right.
And when people just say, just reduce your stress, or sometimes I see people saying, work with your nervous system regulation, like a lot of gut health practitioners.
Ooh.
And they'll be like, make sure you get good sleep, you get movement, you connect with people, you go outside, do some breath work. These are all really great things that we want in our life, right? But if you find that, like, that's not cutting it for you, then it's because there's probably
A little bit of something else going on.
deeper patterns.
Yes.
And sometimes certain tools aren't appropriate for the state of our nervous system that we're in.
Right.
So we need to actually understand our own nervous system's language. And
Yes.
I think that's when we see most benefit. So that is kind of the more conventional approaches that I see today.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love what you just said about learning the language of your own nervous system. And that goes back to how it's individual for every single one of us, because even though our nervous systems may speak similar languages, all of our bodies are similar. We are unique individual creatures.
Yes.
Bio-individual, as our nutritional therapy background would say. And I call this, tell me what you think about this, but the language I developed for kind of what I hear you describing is being wired to a chaotic template.
Oh, I like that.
And it's taken me a long time to realize, like, I just resonate so much with what you're saying with, like, yeah, I'm stuck, like, in fight or flight, but when you don't have that language and that's not your world, and you're like, no, I'm just a partier, I just love going out, I just love, like, all of this high intensity stuff, and like I'm not a chill person. And it doesn't, like, you don't have to become a chill person, but it's like you're saying, developing the tools for your body, your nervous system that actually work for you to feel that resiliency. I love that word, in your nervous system. And I call it being wired to a chaotic template to be able to figure out, like, how do you find stability, resiliency, groundedness within yourself when you're wired to a chaotic template. That's what I've kind of come up with for myself.
Because those who are wired to a chaotic template, right? Like, we're kind of talking there, like, fight or flight. Like, that's kind of like the mode that you're in, right?
Right.
It can feel extremely unsafe to slow down.
Yeah.
Our system goes, no, I don't slow down. I don't do that, because that is an unsafe. Like, I've learned these protective mechanisms and management strategies that make me feel safe by going, doing, like distracting, coping, whatever.
Yes.
And when you try to slow down and actually regulate, you might feel extremely unsafe or extremely anxious at first, because your system has adapted to that chaotic template.
Yes.
Or to that pattern. And again, that's not a bad thing, right?
No,
That's how our system learned how to keep us safe. It's a beautiful, brilliant, survival mechanism, but it's not serving us anymore. Right. And it's not needed anymore. So we're just trying to teach it a different way.
Right. Yeah. And to just specify, like, if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, but what is a chaotic template? Like, maybe you get it. Those who get it, get it. No, I'm just kidding. I'll just explain it a little bit more for me if we're going back to, and then of course you're saying trauma can be anything that is experienced in your life that causes a shift in the nervous system, essentially. And I believe that's how Gabor Mate describes trauma. So it's not necessarily just going back to your childhood, but I mean, that's where our nervous system was developing. That's how we learned how to respond to people. So that's why it feels really important to go back and look at those places. And for me, particularly when we're learning how to respond, that really happens, at least in the research I've done, between the ages of like 0 and 3, and also between even up to 7 years old, is we're in this state. And so for me, I think about that time in my life, and it was like, I love my parents to death, but I was surrounded by people that were partying a lot, that were arguing a lot, that were drinking a lot. And as a child, you know, you develop certain tendencies to be able to adapt to that. And as we're saying, like, that's so beautiful and amazing that the human body can do that. And now as an adult, you can be like, okay, and I want to choose something different.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll just share too, I think one of the doorways for me into these shifts, and of course it's never just one thing, and there's plenty of seeds planted in and throughout our lives, but I'll say meditation was one of those for me, because when I first started meditating, and meditation is not for everyone, it really isn't. But I've been a Zen practitioner now for about 8 or 9 years, and when I first started meditating, I was like, why the fuck can't I do this? This is hard. I'm just sitting here. You're just supposed to sit here and do nothing. And this feels like incredibly excruciating. And then being the person I am that likes to dive into the hard shit, I was like, oh, I'm going to figure this out. Like, and then it was just like turned into another thing that was just kind of led into my life path.
Yeah.
But it's little things like that. And then you, the listener, you get to decide and choose, like, what are little things in your life that you want to choose to be differently. And again, the language I've developed that I'm always sharing with people is like, you probably, I'm guessing in some capacity, want to learn how to be a stable, grounded adult that can respond differently. That's the adult that you know you needed as a kid, so that you can be there with and for other people, especially children, in your life in different ways. And that's how we like shift, right?
Yeah. It's a beautiful explanation of that. There's something you said that I'm like, when you mentioned like you know, from 0 to 3, this like really pivotal time, which, you know, a big part of that is because we're like absolutely dependent on our caregivers, right?
Yeah.
And we're co-regulating with them. Our nervous system is learning what is safe and unsafe around the world because of our caregivers and what their nervous systems are like.
Right.
And how we're co-regulating to them. So there's a lot in that time. And you know, a fun little fact too, by 3 years old, your microbiome is established.
Oh.
So it's in those first 3 years that your microbiome is being established, as well as your brain is developing alongside your gut, and that gut-brain connection is being created in those first 3 years, along with your nervous system is also developing alongside your stress response. So how your adrenal, like HPA axis, will respond to stress is also being developed alongside all of these things in those first 3 years. So that's just like an emphasis of how important like early life is.
Wow.
And you can always change it.
Right.
So you're not destined, but we need to understand maybe what was patterned then.
Yeah. Right. And I know the work you're doing is with Peter Levine and his work.
Yes.
And I love that in his work, he says, like, you don't have to go back and relive the trauma. You don't have to know what it is. You just have to start recognizing these patterns within yourself.
Yes.
And then you get to, it's not like you can just suddenly choose for it to be different, but you can choose that you want it to be different.
Yes.
And work towards that. Oh my God, which is so magical and beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Wow, I was getting all sorts of tingles when you were making those connections with the microbiome being established by 3 and with the stress response, because I'm just you could probably paint a better picture than this, but I'll start. Because we have like our gut response, and there's so much like nerves and nervous system response that comes from our gut that comes to the brain, and then the brain takes that pathway and sends it to the rest of the body. Is that kind of like gut brain body connection?
Yeah. I mean, the gut and the brain are kind of in a feedback loop with each other the whole time, right? So they're constantly communicating and influencing each other. But of course, our brain is also communicating with and influencing other systems and organs of our body too. So there could be impacts from the gut that could then, you know, also impact other areas.
Yeah. Is there a type of hierarchy when it comes to working or looking at these things, or are they all kind of like just that real holistic, wholesome approach? Like it's all connected. There really isn't a hierarchy.
You know, the hierarchy I make is that 80 to 90% of information travels from body to brain, whereas only 20 to 10% of information travels from brain to body. So our brain is heavily dependent on information from our body. Our body is not as dependent on information from our brain.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's why I would like to work somatically.
Yeah. And getting into the body and learning the language of your nervous system. Yeah. Wow. Ooh, that's a potent one. I like that.
I love that. I love that little fact.
That's a big fact. Okay, so let's talk about navigating these spaces as an unlicensed professional, because I know a lot of people, you know, you get into somatics, and somatic therapy specifically is such a big term right now. And then, you know, you have a background with nutritional therapy. And so I'm just wondering, how do you navigate your scope of practice or explain to people that, you know, you're not a therapist?
Right. Yeah. This is a big one, because many of you listening probably see all the like TikTok therapists.
Oh yeah.
You know, like,
so big time.
I mean, there's been such a big boom, and like there's some really amazing, helpful content out there.
Yes.
Especially Courtney and I's content.
Oh yeah.
I'm just kidding. I know. But there's some really helpful content out there, right? I've learned a lot from the internet and from social media, right?
Right.
But with that also comes a lot of people giving advice and offering, you know, even services and businesses where there's like claims, right? Like where they, you know,
the claims
of like, and I know that it's very much of a world that I'm in, so I see a lot of it, but it seems to me that everyone these days is talking about nervous system regulation and trauma.
Right.
And
yeah.
And it can be it's something to just be really careful with, because working with trauma is something that needs to be done really safely and really slowly. And so I have just seen where people might be calling themselves a trauma therapist, or, you know, a trauma practitioner or something, when they don't actually have that license. And that's technically not allowed. It's going to depend on some of your state licensing rules and whatever, but typically you're not allowed to call yourself a therapist if you're not a licensed therapist.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can't really, you know, work with trauma or say that you're a trauma practitioner if you don't have any training. And, you know, like there's different types of training, and I think it's just really about being really clear with that type of training that you've been through and staying within that scope. So for me, right, I'm not a licensed mental health counselor or therapist. So and even being a nutritional therapist, right, I cannot diagnose people with anything. I cannot, you know, give them like a cure. Like it's all about kind of your language. Yeah. And so being within your scope is really making sure that you are practicing the correct language. And people come to me who struggle with things like anxiety or depression. I do not heal those things. I do not treat those things. I can't even say that I treat anything, right? That language is really important. I can't treat, I can't diagnose. I can, you know, give recommendations. I can make suggestions. Yeah. So when it comes to like mental health, for example, I say that I work with mental health through the gut-brain connection in the nervous system. So I will support someone with regulating their nervous system. I can support someone with healing and processing trauma through the lens of my training. So I only do it through somatic experiencing and somatic parts work, because those are things I've been trained in. Yeah. I don't do it through any other modalities. And I'm not going to claim that, you know, and I talk about this in my work of like, if you have anxiety or depression, but I talk about it in the sense of that's because it's all interconnected with the gut brain and controlled by your nervous system. So by doing the work that I can do with the nervous system, or even supporting your microbiome or your gut health, that might have then a effect of improving your anxiety or depression.
Right.
So I just try to be really mindful of the language I'm using. And if I am working with someone, which I do have clients that have things they're dealing with that are just out of my scope.
Yeah.
And I will support them through somatic experiencing, teaching them about their nervous system, helping them with nervous system regulation tools. I'll be a listener. I'll reflect back things that they said. I will support them in listening to their body and just doing what their body is saying. But if things go beyond what I can do, or even if they have more serious trauma than I feel comfortable working with, I am not going to try to navigate that. That is something that then I will suggest they seek other support from. So
yeah,
I don't know if that's a great answer to the question, but it is something that I can really annoy me on the internet when I see people claiming to, like, even something I see is like, oh, here's these, like, if you shake, you're going to release your trauma. Shaking doesn't release your trauma. Shaking can regulate your nervous system in the moment. You can't release your trauma just by shaking. Trauma needs to come from, an impulsive, like, healing your trauma, that comes from an impulsive place within the body, within the context of what happened. And I know that might be kind of complicated. I'm happy to break that down, but there's just a lot of misunderstanding about what actually heals trauma. And I think it's just it's about being really mindful with what people are claiming and what is their training, because trauma is not something that is just like, let's just work with whatever. It's like, no, this is serious and it needs to be taken. Like, true trauma healing is slow. It is a slow process. It is done in little chunks. It is done safely. If anyone's, claiming that this one thing totally healed their trauma, that's just not true.
Right. Because and that's the biggest thing in my life too, is like, it's never just one thing.
Yeah.
And I think that we as human beings, and we're taught, especially in our American society, it's like, you got to just find what that one thing is and fix it. And that's it. And then your problems will be solved. And it's like, that's not how healing works. It's not, with my lens, self-care. That's not how self-care works. And then you and I have both come into these online marketing type spaces where you're taught to pose yourself as an expert and speak to pain points, and to make like these big statements like, I can heal you from this. This is what I do. And it's just, I think that's the hardest thing for me, is because I also see all of these people online that are quote unquote successful because they're getting the clients, they're catching people's attention. It's a psychology tactic.
Totally.
And it makes me cringe. I'm like holding my shoulders right now. I'm like, just can't say that to people, because in my work, and I know you do this too, but it's so client centered that it's like the people have to figure this out for themselves too, and like be in a relationship with the practitioner to understand what's happening and then how things start to shift. But we do live in a very quick, like a very fast-paced, fix-it mentality type culture, and we just want something quick and easy. And when you're speaking to this shaking, to like shake off trauma, that just reminds me so much of bypassing. It's like, that's a great tool, but you're not getting in there and actually like figuring out how to shift the deeper patterns. And it's, again, you don't have to go back and know what that trauma was necessarily, but you have to really get in there and work with the patterns so that they can shift and begin working in a different way.
Absolutely. It's often really subtle. Like, you'll do I'll start somatic experiencing sessions with clients, and it like, sometimes it's a really powerful thing that shifts, but sometimes it's just like really subtle, and it's all about like, my role is to literally, like, I always say, it's like, I'm like the bumpers in the bowling alley. I'm not there to like tell you what to do or direct you. I am there to just like guide you along the way. And your nervous system and your body is the one who's telling me what it needs.
Yeah.
And I'm just there to like, even like they say, shine a little flashlight into the places maybe you're not seeing, right?
Yeah, right.
And that's a slow process, but that's true sustainable healing versus these quick fix, whether we're talking about gut issues and like, oh, quick fix, do this diet or take these supplements. Like, quick fixes don't work if you want true, lasting, sustainable healing.
Right.
And I just see, I think it's hard out there seeing what people label themselves as and what they claim will work. And I struggle with that too. And like, you know, I have a business. I have to market myself.
Right.
I have to, you know, part of that is speaking to like what you're going to get by working with me. Like, what's the transformation? People want the transformation, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, how do I speak? And that's a tough thing to do because healing is different for everyone. And it takes some time.
Yes.
And that's why I always come back to saying, like, true healing is building resiliency. Like, I'm not here to claim that all your symptoms and triggers and problems are going to go away. And I hope they do for you by working with me, you know, or whatever work you do. But when I talk about, like, you know, achieving true healing with the work we do together, to me, true healing is that you build resiliency in your nervous system and your microbiome so that, you know, when symptoms do flare up, because they probably will, again, when triggers happen, when you go through stressors, like I said in the beginning with my healing, like, you're not defeated by it. You don't beat yourself up. You don't think that, you know, you did a horrible thing or you're worthless. You know more about why your symptoms came to be, the patterns in your nervous system. You understand why this is probably flaring up, and you know how to nourish yourself through it so that you can actually move through it more quickly and not be so like stuck in it.
Yeah. One of my favorite sayings that I tell my clients sometimes too, and it just comes up, but it's what you are willing or able to face can flow, and what you resist persists. That's what I hear you describing there. I love what you're saying. I was going to ask actually, like, would your definition of healing be? And you already said it, resiliency. I really love that. The language I use in that is like just the blanket statement of more of like acceptance and like learning, like accepting, like, this is where I'm at and how do you support yourself here? And that's, same, but different.
That's a huge part of it, right? And that like self-love and compassion.
Right.
Because for many of us, especially if we've struggled with chronic symptoms for a long time, or we struggle with mental health conditions, or we struggle with past trauma,
right,
a lot of us have really harsh inner critics and we beat ourselves up. And so when we react to a trigger and we didn't want to, or we have symptoms come up, we might go, what's wrong with me? I'm just never going to feel better. Like, it doesn't matter what I do. That doesn't help us.
Right. Yeah. And that's like a whole nother journey too, is learning how to, be in a different narrative with yourself. I also just want to say here too, you're speaking to like the subtleties and just how subtle healing and shifting in these ways are. And I just couldn't agree more with that. That's something here on the podcast and also on my TikTok that I really do try to share more, because it's these tiny little subtle moments that suddenly you do something, or you do something in your life and you realize that there's just something different about it. You're responding different, you're reacting different, you're able to have a different conversation, you're not having like a certain sensation in the body, these little things, but they are like sincerely can be so subtle. And that's why I personally love like the journey of striving to slow down and be present so that we can notice these, I just call them shifts. I'm saying shift a lot, but that's my thing. Notice these little shifts as they're happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me see what other questions we have listed here. Well, I did want to ask you about like helping people build and rebuild trust within themselves. And I just would take a leap and correct me here and fill in the gaps, but that building this resiliency within yourself also learns basically teaches trust and how to be able to trust and show up for yourself. Is that correct? Or is it a little different?
Totally. And I do speak to it pretty specifically about trusting your body. And the reason I do that is because, well, one, my business is called Trust Your Gut. And so, our gut is the seat of our intuition, right?
Yeah.
So part of it is kind of a play on that. But why I speak to that is because, when, especially if we're looking at like chronic symptoms, that might be, in our physical body, whether that's digestive, or that could be in our mental body, whether we chronic anxiety or whatever it may be. But especially those like physical symptoms that like flare up, it can be really hard to trust our body.
Yeah.
We feel betrayed by our body.
Right. Yes.
And when we go through trauma, we can also feel betrayed by our body.
Yeah.
It can be really hard to trust our body, or even like, and that can like filter into like, do we trust ourselves? Do we trust like to make the best decisions for ourselves? Do we trust our intuition?
Yeah.
So I feel like so much of this work, as we start to learn the language of our nervous system, we develop such this rich, deep connection with our body, and our entire being, that allows us to actually trust it more. And part of that is like, trusting that our body is doing its best to take care of us. Trust our body really wants to be healthy. Trust that our nervous system really is just trying to take care of us. It wants to also, feel regulated, and trust that we can make empowered decisions for ourselves, or speak up for ourselves, or create boundaries, or just, like I said, that in that piece of resiliency, like trust that we know how to navigate stressors and symptoms in our life. So that's what I speak to with that.
That was really beautifully said. I love that. And how that just circles back so seamlessly with everything you've been sharing, the interconnectedness of it all, the subtleties that happen. And it's like, if you're feeling called to this kind of healing, and or feeling frustrated with some of the things that Demi is describing, it's like, just jump in, just try something. I would say, like, put a pause on all of the shit you're trying and just choose one thing, because we really do get so inundated with overload of information, and sometimes we just need to slow down. And that can really be a big pivotal moment, and the help of working with a professional is helping you to like really be able to focus in on what you need. Because at least I know my mind, and I'm always saying our minds are so clever. It's like we're just constantly trying to do so much, and then it's easy to forget what we're doing. It's easy to lose track and to veer off course just naturally. That's just naturally another way that we're wired, especially, at least for me personally, as a neurodivergent individual.
Well, and this is one of my favorite quotes from Peter Levine. He says, "Only you can do it, but you can't do it alone." So you are in charge of your own healing, right? You have to take responsibility for that, but we're not meant to do it alone.
Right.
We are community-based,
Yes.
wired for connection creatures who need co-regulation with other people. And sometimes one of the best things for my client is just to co-regulate with my nervous system, because I'm going to be sure I'm in a regulated state before I meet with that person. Right. We need other people to witness us and hold that space for us to be seen and heard, and then be able to actually, some of like the most profound healing can just be co-regulating with someone else.
Yes.
And especially like a professional who is there to like really support you in that journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's potent. I want to keep asking questions, but I think I'm going to give us some permission to just wrap this up. Please tell people, though, where they can find more out about you, how they can work with you. You have your own podcast.
Yep. So my podcast is called Trust Your Gut. It'll be Trust Your Gut, and they'll say with Demi Fair at the bottom. So yeah, go check that out. I talk about all this kind of stuff there. My website is trustyourguthealth.com. That's where you can just find everything, my social media, and just the different ways to work with me. Really, the best way right now is, in this year, I opened up my signature program.
Oh, yeah.
Gut Brain Healing Toolkit. And it is like really, it is everything. It is everything we've been talking about today. It is all of the components of what I find to be the most foundational and important stuff, where we're going to go through, strengthening your gut-brain connection, learning about and regulating your nervous system. I teach you these tools for working with your trauma in a really safe way. Then we go into actually working with your digestive health in the appropriate way, working with your microbiome, and building that trust in your body and your intuition. So it's truly like, that's why it's my signature program.
Comprehensive.
It's the most comprehensive, holistic approach to gut brain healing that I've found. And from my, own 17-year journey, which is beyond my training. It's just, I have such embodied wisdom in this field, and I've put it all into this program. So that's really the best way to work with me and just be so set up in this healing path. And then I'm on Instagram and TikTok. It's at trustyourgut.health. I think these will probably be in the show notes.
Yes, we will link them below.
So easy, and I just try to share a lot of helpful stuff on there too. And on my website too, I have a free masterclass if you want to learn more about how I approach, IBS healing, and a quiz if you want to understand what your dominant nervous system state is and how it might impact your physical, mental, emotional, and digestive health. So again, my website's the whole hub for everything. You can find my podcast there as well, and whatnot. And DM me with any questions. I love to answer questions. So
connect in that way.
Cool. In that way.
I'm excited. I'm gonna have to take that quiz. That sounds like a really
I'm
nice quiz.
Curious what your results will be.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, Demi, or with me, us the listeners, but me.
Yeah, that was super fun conversation. I could jam on this all day, and it's fun to talk with someone who has their own deep wisdom around this topic as well. It's the most fun.
A deep thank you from both Demi and I for tuning in to today's episode. A fun and simple way that you could support this podcast and support us as small business owners would be to take a screenshot and post it on social media. Give us a tag. Let us know what you like about the episode. And be sure to check out the show notes for further information on how to connect with us. Thank you again for listening, and thank you again for taking care of you.